Hi, everyone. Welcome to our very last episode of the Daily Roundup from the AAAS meeting in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Trisha Chakraborty. I'm a first-year fellow at the National Institute of Justice at the Department of Justice. Joining me tonight are two of my fellow first-years and fellow PhDs, Travis Kent, who is at the... Hi, Travis.
Hi.
At the wait, I have to get to who you are and where you're from. The National Institute of Child Health and Human Development at NIH. And we also have Chris Yarsh, who's a first-year fellow in the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness at the Department of Defense, which sounds like a really serious job. Fortunately, Chris is not, or maybe unfortunately, I don't know. Anyway, we're here to talk about all the things that's happened today on the very last day of the conference and answer any of your questions. So if you do have questions, drop them into the chat box and we'll get to as many of them as possible. With that, the most pressing thing that I feel the need to talk about tonight is Travis's diet. So Chris, you know this is going to come up. And actually, I want to see if I can find this picture on my phone. But Chris, Travis apparently has never eaten at Chipotle.
It's true.
That's impressive.
So
Before yesterday, yeah.
We finally took him. And I don't know if you can see this, but here he is holding his first Chipotle burrito.
The size of a kitten. I couldn't believe it.
You look so proud. Like you're extremely excited. It's one of the DC things, right? Go to Chipotle.
I know. Living in the big city, it's a trip.
How was your first Chipotle meal, and how does it stack up to your other meals, Travis?
It wasn't too shabby. Are they getting paid for this? Is this?
No, I don't know if I'm supposed to advertise for Chipotle, but whatever you say, whether it be good or bad, I don't know.
All right, well, in that case, it was pretty good, but I've had better burritos.
All right, an average 3 out of 5. I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on to actual real conversations that people actually care about. Chris, today you went to a talk on integrating new technology into science and government and a whole bunch of other stuff that we do. So my first question for you is, what did you learn about how new technology affects society and the way we develop as a society?
Yeah, so I mean, this might be a little bit strange to say, but it's going to be weird. So the first talk I went to today was about integrating a little bit how AI works when you're on the other side of it. So basically, how do you get AI to act like people when people are not really rational? Because we developed like police negotiators or people who want to just be able to negotiate different policy options, kind of work on the other side of the table. And you have to get to the point where you need a lot of data and you need to do this machine learning to make it work. But you have to remember that people don't actually work that way. Like a lot of times when we're negotiating, we're thinking about it, we're not really going with step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of logic. It's a lot of feeling, it's a lot of making the best guess possible. So the machine can do an optimal job of sort of, this is step 1, this is step 2, but it's not really how negotiations go in real life.
That makes a lot of sense. So based off of that, is there any personal impact on this, on the way you use technology and the way you think about AI and, its role in your life?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked that. So one of the other talks in that same session was about Twitter bots. So a lot of it related to the 2016 election, but just the data available to track how those things have sort of been popping up. And I think what all of it makes me think of is somebody who's not a computer scientist, who's not used to that, is really to start wondering, who's on the other side of the screen. Like, I know you two are on the other side of this screen. Like, if you're just going to be interacting with something online, it's going to be really hard to tell at some point whether it is a bot or whether it's a person, and sometimes it's like, in the case of some of the campaigns, people using bots. The one example they gave was there is a tin in one of the UK elections that would basically like flirt with you and then talk about Jeremy Corbyn. So, I mean, it's going to be weird and it's going to take getting used to, but there is data and scientists are working on tracking it and on trying to understand it so we can kind of piece it together.
That's great. That's a little scary, but also great.
On this nice though, right? I mean, flirting bots, that's kind of nice, right?
Well, if you're really lonely, which
It just leads you in and then talks about politics. It's like everyone else in DC. So maybe it is really realistic.
all right, on the subject of really novel technology, Travis, you went to a really cool talk about organs being developed on chips and the technology surrounding it, which sounds like an interesting return to basic science, but with really practical application and really transferable application to, human needs and research. So can you just tell us a little bit about what that talk was and what you heard up there?
Yeah. So it was a really interesting talk. It was by, let me see if I get the name, Geraldine Hamilton from Emulate. And basically the system that she's working with, you say it's a sort of a return to basic biology. It is, but it isn't. Like when we think of drug development, we generally go from sort of in the culture dish to in the animal, then to in the human, right? But so many drugs fail from the transition from animal to human. And the reason is because we don't really have any good testing for humans. Humans are so different. I mean, the three of us are different, just sort of sitting here talking. You can sort of see all of our phenotypic differences, and that is nothing on the genetic level. And that sort of explains what exactly. That explains why a lot of our drugs are failing. And so coming into, so Dr. Hamilton, she developed this system where it's an in vitro system, but you can take sort of tissue from a human. And the example that she had was she took lung tissue, and the sort of chip itself, it was about this big, and it's sort of hard to describe, but it actually sort of like flexed and moved. And so when you breathe, the cells that are taking in air, they sort of can contract and expand and contract and expand. So it better simulates what happens in the human body. So it's a more physiologically relevant in vitro culture system. So that was just sort of one example of this really cool novel technology being used in humans. And it has the added benefit of actually being able to use the patient's cells themselves. So you can sort of get a more personalized approach too.
Wow, I hope I never need an organ transplant, but I also hope that if I do, this technology is on board, by that time, because it just seems like a more precise methodology and paradigm than what's currently available, if I understand.
Right. And so, yeah, and there's a lot of sort of applications. Like right now, they're sort of working on organ by organ, but I mean, in our bodies, our organs are all talking to each other, right? So while you can get a lot of specificity with the organs themselves, she's developing a system where you can actually take these sort of organs on a chip and sort of put them in communication with each other so that you can better understand how these drugs are being metabolized in sort of the whole larger dynamic.
That's amazing. I guess on the subject of health and specifically long-term and over-the-horizon planning for human health and human discovery, Chris, you went to a talk that focused on the need for a wider focus across disciplines to study and tackle health challenges. And I think you called it, or they called it, health beyond humanity. So what are some of those disciplines that, we need to cross, first of all?
So it was, I wrote this quote.
Chris, can you hold on 1 second? You're breaking up. I think I'll just give the computer a second to catch up.
Sure.
Okay. Try again.
Sure, it's the computer. Chris is just...
So there's this big that researcher who...
Nope, now you've become a robot. All right, Chris, I'm going to help you with that question. Hopefully, your face will look like you died soon. I don't know if anybody else is doing this. But... Oh, you sound good have eyes now. It's fine. Travis, until Chris comes back to us, let me move on and ask you just to talk about the Apollo program. There was a talk about, looking at the space program 50 years back and also planning out 50 years into the future. So what can we expect of the U.S. programs moving forward?
Yeah, so this was my favorite talk of the day. It was just really sort of interesting. And it's honestly one of probably the only science talk that I was like choking up in. So the first part of it was sort of a retrospective looking back at all of the sort of Apollo missions and talking about what they brought back and what we've learned from that. And that was really, really interesting. And then sort of talking about how Apollo has informed the Apollo missions to the moon have informed what's going on in the future. So, for example, the sort of missions to Mars, if people have been paying attention, I don't know if you've heard in the news, the Opportunity rover in Mars, sort of, it was supposed to last for 3 months, and it ended up lasting for, I think it was 14 years. I wrote it down.
Travis? Travis is now just a frozen blob. In the meantime, RIP Travis and the rover. Chris, you are no longer a frozen blob. Right? Guys, I think I'm just all alone here with two people who are just frozen on the screen with me. Our social media director is over in the corner just cracking up right now because none of us can literally do anything. Oh, Chris is back. Hey, Chris. Can you hear or see me? Say something. Chris? I would keep you entertained with song and dance, but unfortunately, I can only move the screen so far. So while we wait for people to get internet connection back, I guess I can tell you about one of the talks that I saw. And this isn't quite science related, but it has a lot to do with science communication. AAAS, and especially the AAAS Fellowship, is one that really pushes for science communication to a broad audience. And so one of the talks I went to was discussing science presentation without the use of a PowerPoint. And apparently we as scientists have quite a dependence upon PowerPoint. Chris, you're back. I'm talking about PowerPoint and how important it is for us to consider our audience when we speak. And that'll actually allow us to get out and, give out a more salient and more appropriate message. Can you hear me? So, I'm alone again, sitting in front of a mural of a mall, here to entertain you, while our social media director figures out what's going on over there. So the conversation I was having with you was about this science communication message that AAAS really promotes, and the use of appropriate presentations, of the appropriate language, and of the appropriate tools to get science out to all of the audiences we need to. Of course, it's really important for us as scientists to talk to other scientists, but it's also really important that we get our message out to the lay people who may not know our science as well, to encourage them to trust in our science and take an interest in the kind of work that we do. So on that note, it's really important to pay attention to the kind of messaging that we provide by using PowerPoint to our benefit. We hear a lot about, not using too many words or not using appropriate pictures. But if you have a chance, take a look at, I'll let you know, this one guy who had this amazing presentation about the role of PowerPoint. And I know, it sounds a little bit weird. You should do it. Until we get back. So this presentation was called Exceptional Presentations in Spite of PowerPoint, and it was by someone named Mark Jones from the Dow Industrial Company. Take a look at his work if you can. All right. In the meantime, I will keep you updated. Ooh, okay. So it looks like we're done. We'll come back to you soon, hopefully. Otherwise, have a great day, and thanks for joining us. Bye.